What up, guys? Welcome to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast, episode number 329. Today, we've got one of my favorite people in Jiu-Jitsu on the podcast. We have Brandon Mccaghren. Brandon is, a friend of mine from years ago, and he created a organization called the PGF, the Professional Grappling Federation, and again, he started it, as he'll talk about, back in 2020, and then it's grown into this thing now where they're doing these super cool events out in Las Vegas. And then Brandon himself has become super, super busy with all these different commentary gigs. He was one of the commentators at CJI. He does some other ones for like the Combat Worlds and the UFC Fight Pass events and stuff. So super cool to kind of catch up with him. We've had him on previous on the podcast way back in the day, like 2000 and was it 18 or 19 or something like that?
Yeah, he's been on a couple times, but
it was a long time.
Yeah, he's it was so fun to always reconnect with him and talk to him.
So you guys can be able to hear the chat we have with them. We will talk about obviously some of the commentary from the CJI. We'll talk about the PGF. We'll also talk about some interesting thought philosophies on making jiu-jitsu exciting and bringing in some of the elements that he is bringing from other sports into jiu-jitsu, because his whole thing is, let's make it a sporting event that people want to go to. So let's basically, steal these ideas from other sports like football, basketball, whatever, and let's pull those over to jiu-jitsu to make it a more fun event. And so I think that part was actually really interesting to talk about. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen, because obviously they don't happen without them. Charles Webb CBD, if you guys have never checked them out before, charleswebb.com is the website. Again, CBD is a product that many of you guys I'm sure have heard about. A lot of different companies make it. Charlotte's Web became the CBD product that I use when I used it several years ago, because of the fact that what I noticed was using different CBD products, it was kind of all over the place, whether or not I would get any benefits from it or not. Their stuff is made in a very, let's say the word, scrutinized fashion. It's third-party tested to ensure the purity of it. The people that actually work at the company are they're like giant nerds about the stuff, right? I've been to their farms before. Eugene and I went to their farms to check out and talk to the actual people that make the thing happen. And so again, they're trying to put out a really good product, and their mission statement behind it, it's really cool. So you can check out more about them if you want. But again, I like it from the standpoint of becoming an older guy, an older grappler, and trying to leverage any tools or supplements or techniques that I can to improve my recovery, because as you get older, that's kind of the big fight, is to be able to do all the things you want to do and then recover fast enough to do them again. And so CBD is one of the tools, one of the supplements that I throw into the mix. If you want to check them out and look at some of their products, you can go to charleswebb.com. That's the website. The promo code is Chewjitsu30 for 30% off. CHEWJITSU 30 for 30% off. And again, if you decide to get some CBD after you're done, send us a copy of your receipt. You can just do a little screenshot picture either to Instagram or to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast at Gmail. And if you do that, then we will send you back a free bonus just as a thank you for supporting us and getting yourself some CBD. And again, you can enjoy the bonus afterwards. So again, you can check that out at charleswebb.com. Also, thanks to our sponsor, Epic Roll, epicrollbjj.com. They are one of the sponsors of the PGF. And they help make that possible, but they're also one of our sponsors, and they make really good jiu-jitsu gear. All of my jiu-jitsu gear that I get made, as far as my no-gi gear, I get made through them. I have a new set of rash guards and shorts coming out soon. Really excited about those. If you guys were looking on Instagram the other day, you probably saw me wearing like the white and gray one. And one of my students, like, I came into the gym and they were like, Chewy, what's that? They were like, they were looking at their gawk and they're like, oh, it's cool looking. And then one of my students said, he's like, I want that. He's like, Chewy, if I beat you today, if I tap you today, do I get to take that home? I was like, sure, why not? So, we had a nice, fun, spirited roll. And then afterwards I recorded the before, and then I recorded the after. He did not submit me. I walked out of there with my own rash guard. That said, he did make me breathe a little heavy after I submitted him, I think like the fourth or fifth time. So
You know who you are.
Dude, it's Jordan. He's just goofy. He's goofy. He's just having fun. But seriously, Matt and everybody associated with Epic Roll, they make great stuff. If you guys want to check them out, go to epicrollbjj.com, and you can use the promo code Chewjitsu20 for 20% off the order. And again, that'll get you 20% off a gi, a rash guard, t-shirts, whatever it is that you want. Matt's got a ton of great stuff there. Check it out. Great customer service, great quality stuff, and all at epicrollbjj.com. And if you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join up and become a member of the Patreon for the podcast, obviously you're supporting the podcast that you listen to on a regular basis for a very inexpensive price. And then on top of that, we have a bundle of extras on the back end that you can get. If you want to look at what all those bundles are and what all the information is, go to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast and get details on how you can support the podcast and also get some cool bonuses. And guys, if you want to get my daily email, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join. So I send out a daily Chew Crew letter, usually Monday through Friday, sometimes on the weekend. And again, it ranges in sort of ideas that it might be. Today's September 11th. The one I sent today was kind of heavy, although I got a lot of replies back from it. So I feel like the message that I intended to share through that email was well received. But it goes through everything from jiu-jitsu to just different ideas on life, philosophical ideas I'm looking into, books I'm reading, all kinds of stuff, just random stuff, all related to jiu-jitsu or something to help improve your thought process, whatever it might be. You can get all that. And then also too, whenever you join the True Crew and get the letter, I'll give you 2 free ebooks. One is on game planning, which is useful. I had a guy at the Lansing, Michigan. He's a black belt now. We just had the Jiu-Jitsu Open in Lansing. He came up to me and he said, "Hey man, like years ago," because I put that ebook out in 2017. He said years ago, he's like, "I got that ebook." He's like, "It made such a big impression on me as far as my competitions go." He's like, "It just helped me sort of line out what I want to do when I compete." Had the same thing happen to a guy in 2020 where he unfortunately beat one of my students. But then he comes up to me after the match is over and he hands me or shows me his mind map that he put together using the ebook that I gave. And I was like, well, great. I'm glad you used it, and just hated that you used it against my guy. But nonetheless, if you guys want to get any of those resources, go to chujitsu.net/join to check them out. And so guys, with that said, let's jump into this podcast with Brandon. What up, bro? So good to have you back on the podcast, man. I feel like you've been busy, bro, because I know that, the few times that we've chatted, you're always traveling, you're always into something. What have you had going on recently?
Yeah, I feel like I'm traveling every weekend, dude. Got to see you guys in Vegas. That was
Yeah.
nice. Got to hang out a little bit. But yeah, between the CJI commentary and then all the stuff that's going on with the PGF now, and just doing seminars on the weekends, I feel like I don't know, I feel like I'm seeing the whole world. It's crazy, but I'm having such a good time and I'm really enjoying everything. So yeah, I feel great, dude. I'm in Alabama like for the first time
I
for
know.
a long time.
When did all the traveling ramp up? Like when did that kind of really start building, and the commentary gigs and all the stuff you've been doing? When did you start to kind of get busier?
It's gonna sound crazy, but it was during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was when everything really shifted for me, honestly, because okay, the pandemic starts. Whatever you think about it, it starts and it's affecting us all, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a gym owner, like I have a personal brand at this point, but I have my website I've had for a couple of years, but it's like my role that I see myself in is I own a gym. I'm a jiu-jitsu guy that owns a gym, and I also have a website. You know what I mean? That the gym is the primary focus, and I also do commentary every now and then for some stuff, right? That's a cool side.
Yeah, because you were doing like the EBI or some EBI combat worlds and
Yeah,
stuff like
I've
that.
been messing around with it.
Yeah.
First one I ever did was like the On It Invitational back in
Okay.
the day, and then EBI and combat jiu-jitsu. I had done a few of them, right? But then when the pandemic hits, you're like, man, what am I gonna do? Like, what if gyms don't get to come back for a long time, And I just shifted into, well, then what am I gonna do? How am I gonna stay in the industry? I have to focus more on personal brand, so it has to switch. I have to go from guy that owns a gym that has a personal brand to the personal brand being the main business.
Mm-hmm.
Because what if the gym stops ever producing producing revenue consistently or whatever? So anyway, you're having all these crazy thoughts during the pandemic. Like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
And I just decided to make a shift to where the personal brand was the primary product, where creating media was the primary product. And at the same time, Eddie and Victor want to keep doing combat jiu-jitsu shows, and they're doing them in Mexico. Right. And so my travel actually ramped up a little bit at that time as far as the commentary gigs go. And so, yeah, I started doing it more and more, and I'm getting more and more experience. And then when everybody comes rip roaring out of everything's open again, here comes the jiu-jitsu shows, start pop, 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 pop. Everybody's been hungry for it. And so the industry just grew, and I just happened to be in position to start growing with it, I feel like.
Yeah, and you started the PGF during 2020, right?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
There's just no other competitions. And I felt like, man, we got to keep something going for my guys.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the way it started was just gonna be like, I just wanted it to be something to where my guys could get repeated exposure to competition. So the first season we did it every week. We did it Friday night every week for what it was at like 13 weeks, and the schedule
I remember
was driving down, dude. It was crazy. It was a psycho idea. But
it was probably the perfect time though, because had you done, you think about it now, like, hey, listen, guys, I'm going to run a tournament series and it's going to last for 13 weeks. Every week you're going to have to drive to Decatur, Alabama. Right now, people would probably go, whatever. Right, exactly. But during that time when nothing else is going on, they're like, yeah, sure, sign me up.
It was honestly, it was a crazy idea, but you're right. The timing of it was really important, which was part of why we did it then. Cause I've been kind of sitting on this idea for a long time, and we had kind of like mapped out, how we wanted to do it and how would we lay out a league if we had a league. What would a jiu-jitsu league look like? That would be so crazy. And so, yeah, that was the first iteration of it. And it was honestly, structure-wise, it's closer to where I intend to go, but it was too big of a project for a while. So what we started doing was compressing the whole season down into 1 week. That way we can run multiple of them, and we can start like gathering the experience that we need, like in a compressed and quick fashion. Cause it's a grassroots thing. Like, it's grown from my gym in Decatur. So I'm not taking out a ton of loans and stuff like that to build this thing. I've been paying for this thing out of my pocket. So we've been working on a small budget, but we've been able to build the experience while really the attention wasn't there. So when it came time to roll out for a big season, like season 6, we had a lot more experience than you probably think.
What was your biggest lesson maybe or the biggest area of growth, do you think, from season 1 to season 6? Was there something that you feel like really helped you change course or kind of create the product that you envisioned?
I mean, obviously the big injection with Zoe and Heather Gracie coming into the picture has been the most obvious, like you can look at this moment and then you can look at this moment and then there's a giant shift.
Yeah.
But I feel like just learning, it's just been so much to learn. I just don't know that I don't have a model to follow. You know what I mean? And like within the jiu-jitsu industry, with like somebody I can just call up and be like, how did you do this or whatever. So I feel like I've been watching sports more than ever to try to like
take ideas from there.
Emulate what they do. And like, I'm watching it from a different perspective. And so I feel like every like sports season, I have like a new, like, I got to start doing it like that. So, but those are all like almost in the way that I'm thinking about it, not necessarily like visual changes that are big for everybody else to see, but just like the structure, the organization, the direction of it.
I think it's smart because like from a business standpoint, a lot of times jiu-jitsu stuff is kind of like, very far behind a lot of other stuff. And so like when you take other ideas from more developed forms of media or sports entertainment or whatever it might be, you know, there's probably tons of lessons to be learned there. We had the producers from the CGI come on, you know, and they were taking, they you know, these guys have produced these other big shows, both
X
in
Games.
all kinds of stuff. And so they're like trying to figure out how to take, you know, with the short amount of time that they have, to take all these different ideas and like, let's bring them to jiu-jitsu. Let's improve the production quality rather than just, you know, let's do this, you know. And I think like doing that is a smart idea, opposed to just look around in jiu-jitsu, because again, a lot of times it hasn't, not much has changed, right? So looking from different areas where you can bring in new ideas is probably a smart thing to do.
Man, that guy you had on, Todd,
Yeah.
that's a good dude, man. Like he was, like you said, he was the producer for CJI, and I just don't have enough good things that I could say about him. He was super professional. He delivered a great product. He was easy to work with. He was a nice dude. I mean, they really brought a great crew out there. So
What was
he definitely contributed to like a monumental moment in the sport. Like he was a big part of it.
yeah.
Well, that's why we kind of wanted to have him on, because it's like one of those things where obviously, like, you know, Craig Jones and those guys in Seth, and they have this vision of what they want to create, you know. But you know, you know as well as I do, like, let's say for instance, you with PJF, you have this vision of what it looks like in your head, but then you have to have people to help you execute on that. And so it's fun to talk to those people that helped make it happen, because, you know, a lot of times there's lessons to be learned, but also to, like you said, a lot of times they kind of fly under the radar, you know, nobody really knows about them, because, you know, they're the guys in the backstage putting things together. They're not the front men. And so, you know, I wanted to hear more about like kind of where they came from and what they brought to jiu-jitsu, because that there was a really like incredible stream that they put together, and a really incredible production that they put together at the event, that you know, and I think that everybody kind of agrees on that at this point. So
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna find anybody who felt like it didn't go that great.
yeah.
Like it was an incredible, just what a wild time to be jujitsu dorks. You know what I mean? Like what a crazy time. All this stuff spinning around us and happening. It's like we're all riding a wave, and it's just so cool, man. I just love jujitsu so much. It's so cool.
What was the process of you getting involved with CJI? Like, I want to ask you kind of how that came about, and also what were your expectations getting into? Because we none of us knew what to expect. You know, obviously I think it exceeded all expectations. In my opinion, everything I had, I didn't know, you know, with 2 months to go, like, what kind of product are you going to have? Obviously, you have a lot of really great athletes, and once the athletes started coming over, you knew there's going to be some crazy matchups. But like, how did you get involved, and like, what was your vision of what that CGI was going to look like, and then the experience being a part of it?
I knew it was gonna be good. Just from my early conversation with Craig, I knew that he was like taking it super seriously, and so I knew it was going to be good. And then when I found out the caliber of people that he had hired to help, it's like, oh, this is gonna be a banger. Like, oh, he's flying Josh Palmer and Howell in. Like, he's not just throwing together like the homies. Like, he's bringing in real producers. He's renting a real venue, you know. So I knew it was going to be good. Now I didn't know what it was going to be like. I knew it was going to be wild. I did know it would be wild. I thought the idea with the pit was going to play out great, and it did. But me and Craig, we're very different, right? We're very, very different kinds of people. But I feel like we have an aligned vision for where we want to see the sport go. And so we started talking. I knew it was going to be a hit right away. Yeah. I didn't know. I don't think I understood early on how big of a hit it was going to be.
Yeah.
But as it got closer and closer, I was like, oh man, this thing's going to crush.
Well, and I mean, it crushed. And I think one of the things that was really important, and we talked about this a little bit, was a little bit, you know, because again, you could have the best production value. Here's a great example. You can go back and watch some of the old Metamoris matches, and, you know, they had a great, for the time period that they came out, they had great production value. but most of the matches were snoozers. They're terrible. I mean, like they were okay matches if you're a jiu-jitsu guy and you like watching stuff, but like
that's the difference though.
Yeah, but if you're going to get someone who is even a casual person, but even me, like there were several matches where I'm watching them, I'm like, this is so boring because neither person's really engaging, because at the end of it, we just go to a draw. And we've talked before about like, match duration and like, how to make a match exciting. Right. And, one of the things I thought, and we'll talk about the PGF style later on, when we get more into the PGF, I thought, the alley, the pit was great, because obviously now there's no out of bounds. And if you think about every match you've ever watched, imagine that match, there's no out of bounds. That's such a game changer, because a lot of times there's action that's happening and then it goes out of bounds and then it stops the action, comes back to the center, and then it changes everything up. But even the 5-minute round system, where, you're taking these incredibly athletic dudes and you're saying you got 5 minutes and then you're going to get a break, 5 minutes and then a break, opposed to, hey man, you got 20 or 30 minutes. That's a long time to have a straight, consistent match, and it a lot of times creates passivity. So what I'm getting at is, I think that along with all the good production value, everything else, the announcers, you guys commentating, they also had a really good format that made for exciting matches, so that like when they delivered it to people weren't watching the stream and going, God, these matches are terrible. They were like, oh snaps, this is really exciting. And it was like this sort of perfect storm. But what are your philosophies on like making a jiu-jitsu match exciting and adjusting the rules or the time and everything else to make that happen?
So a couple of things. First of all, I totally agree with you. I thought that the format was really cool. I think a lot of people had questions about the 3-round format though.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I knew that it was going to work out, because I'd been to do commentary in Kazakhstan for AIGA a couple of times, and they have a similar format. Now they score it differently, but they busted into 3 rounds like that. And I remember going into that first one, I was like, this is a terrible idea. And then I sat there and did commentary for it, and it was killer. I loved the format. And then I went back and did it again, and I loved it again on their second show. So I knew that the 3-round format was going to be a hit. Exactly what you said. They get to rest in between, catch their breath. After 5 minutes of comp work at the high level, you get a 1-minute blow. Dude, you can go back out there and run it again.
That's right.
So those guys got to refresh, go back out there, regroup, hear a little something from his coach in his ear, get a sip of water, and go try to kill a guy again. Like, that made for a lot of exciting action. And to your point, I do feel like, let's say there's 100 points of aggressiveness to spend in the course of a match. I have 100 points of aggressiveness and cardio and pushing really hard to spend in a match. If you stretch that out over 20 minutes, I spend it like this.
Mm-hmm.
But if you compress that down to 6 minutes, I'm still going to be spending the same amount of aggressiveness. I'm still going to send 100% of it, but it's all going to be compressed down into a shorter time. And I think that makes for more exciting action, because the guys can just push. The other thing that I think is really important is that we have to find ways to penalize or to like reward offense.
Mm-hmm.
Like a sports league, when they make a change to the rules, it's always in favor of the offense. It's in favor of putting more points on the board, right? So when they institute a new rule, and let's just think about like football. In the beginning, there probably wasn't pass interference. You know what I mean? But over time, they go, well, listen, if we want more points on the board and more fans happy and more fun to watch, we got to let him stop. We can't let him tackle the receiver for the first 5 yards. You got to give him a little space. And then you got to, if the ball's on the way, you got to let him get the ball before you can crack him. Mm-hmm. So you have to give him a little space so that the offense can score. So I think you have to punish good defense and good survival instincts in order to push offense. So I think that maybe that's kind of the direction that I want to push with the PGF rules. Like, We're rewarding offense. We're making it easier to score. We're getting you closer to a submission, and we're decreasing the time to just push you.
What kind of format are you? So like the PGF's like 6 minutes, right?
Yes.
And then, so talk about that. Talk about the duration of time in the PGF, and then maybe talk about some of the things that you're tweaking with the rule set for the PGF to make the matches as exciting.
So like stalling, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
you pass my guard. It's some kind of strange alternate universe where you were able to pass my guard. Don't hurt me, dude. I'm just playing. All right, so you pass my guard, and you get out to side control, and you're locked down on me, and I'm locked down, and we're into what we would think of as a stalemate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just when you think about that, who's stalling? If we're okay, we got to fix stalling. Somebody's got to get called for stalling here. Who gets called for stalling, in your opinion?
Person on top.
Okay.
They should. I mean, because you can honestly hold somebody down. If you're on top in side control, you can hold them down and not let them move.
But it's tough too, because then sometimes you see like you get like a great example like in Metamoris was when Andre Goval went against Huron, where Huron basically just did this, balled up, and man, like if you get against like a really good black belt who's like, I don't want to engage, you can put them in like mount, side control, and if they don't give you anything to work with because they're not escaping, they're not pushing it, it's really tough. So I can see it go either way.
Ways. Yeah.
All right, so I feel like it's very clear.
It's on the top guy.
The stalling is on the bottom guy.
Okay.
Because he's in the bad position. And if somebody's got to take risk here, like if I force the offensive guy to take a risk right here,
mm-hmm.
does that move us closer to or further away from a submission?
Because you're
further away.
Well,
yeah.
it depends
Further
because if he starts having to expose himself when this person's in a perfectly defensible position, then it opens up more escapes where the person can regain back to a position, opposed to if that person on the bottom is forced to actually go for an escape or whatever, then the space opens up for transitions and for scrambles for submissions.
So if I call stalling on the top guy that's holding side control, I push him away from control that leads to submission.
Mm-hmm.
I push us as a viewer, I get you further away from what you came for.
Mm.
If I call stalling on the bottom guy, then he has to take a risk, which opens up and brings the viewer closer to what they came for, which was a submission and some offense. So from a product standpoint, from a league standpoint, from a professional sport standpoint, the stalling has to be on the bottom guy, in my opinion.
Cool.
That's the way that we're doing it.
I gotcha. Here's a question, because this is like, something that it happened at the CGI, and you'll see this in different matches periodically, where you'll have a guy with just disgustingly good guard retention. And then you'll have a guy who's passing, who's making attempts in passing, but can't quite nail it down. But then the person's on the bottom is able to react. So in that situation, if it goes to like a stalling call, or if you're looking at the stalling, how do you look at it like from a passing versus guard player situation? Do you simply address who's being more aggressive going forward, or is there something that you look for?
So let's think about a situation where I'm playing my open guard. I'm down on my back, and you're kind of coming down into that headquarters passing range, or you're getting down close to my knee shield, but I'm playing a frames stiff arm game. Okay. So that's the situation. You're coming down to my guard and I'm framing you. Who's stalling?
I'd say probably the guy on the bottom.
Okay. What do you think, Chewy?
In my opinion, guy on the bottom. If I'm initiating from the top and I'm coming in and you're pushing away, then I'm coming in and you're just sort of defending out there.
100%. Okay. I totally agree with that. So that's kind of the criteria that we're going to use to call the bottom guy for stalling. Like, are you straight arming, framing, kicking away? Like, there's a difference between putting a post up and collapsing it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus framing and keeping you out of there, either with my knees or like kicking you out of position. Like, I got to give the top guy a chance to come in here and engage. And now if you're playing more like in close range and looking to set traps as the bottom guy, and then the top guy is just kind of playing on the outside looking for his perfect exact grip that he wants, and he's not exactly getting there, now the stalling's on the top guy.
Sure. I got you.
So, but listen, that's the hard part in jiu-jitsu. Is like there's time for stalling calls in those moments. It's hard to make those calls.
Yeah.
So that's where we've been doing like an official training program in the off season. And so we've actually been like working on this stuff pretty hard. So I'm excited to break it out. Like, if you get called for stalling in the PGF, you go to bottom referee position.
Yeah, I thought that was a neat change that you guys made in the rules. Explain that for people that are listening, because I remember seeing that and I was like, I think that's cool because it gives the stalling calls there's a real stick to that, where, because a lot of times, like as an example in the ADCC, you get a couple stalling calls before you ever get a negative point. And so a lot of people will bank on that. They'll sort of fiddle around and not quite, one stalling call, I'm good. It's a warning. Another it's warning, whereas saying like, oh man, I might be in a bad spot if I get a stalling call, that definitely gives you a bit of a fire under you. Sorry, go ahead and explain that rule to people if they haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, so if you get called for stalling in the PGF, you go to the bottom of referee position, just like wrestling. But the difference is in jiu-jitsu, bottom referee position is almost having your back taken, and your neck is exposed, and your arms are exposed. And like, it's bad. That's a bad spot to be at in jiu-jitsu. You get called for 3 of those, and 5 of those, and you get automatically DQ'd. Like, if you have to go to that position 5 times, if you have to get called for stalling 5 times, it's an automatic DQ. You're not going to get to the draw. You're not going to get to the thing. You're not going to get that draw you were playing for right there. You're not going to get that overtime you were playing for. You're out of the game. So, like, if you stall, we're going to give some really close looks at your back, and then we're just going to throw you out of there. We're not going to let you play for overtime, like in the finale, for instance.
Yeah. What's the grip?
The finale we use overtime. During the regular season, we don't use overtime. We just go to a draw. But if you have 3, so 5 is an auto DQ. But if you have 3 when the match ends, you lose. Also, so you can't stall. We're not going to allow it.
Brandon, what's the grip setup? Like, so if you're in the referee position, what does the top player have? Does he get like shoulder?
Is it like legit, like wrestling across the belly and then on the elbow?
Yep.
Okay.
Elbow, middle finger on the belly button.
Yeah, that's like straight wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it works. So we just took it. Like, we'll just use that. We don't have to reinvent. Like, everybody's trying to come up with like, what's the right way to penalize? Like, what position should I put him in? Okay, like. Well, what's the most? Now you got to put yourself in the mindset of the viewer that's consuming it, that's new to jiu-jitsu, or it's just your mother-in-law or whatever that's hanging out watching jiu-jitsu at the house with you for some reason. Okay, what's the most boring part
in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, if you're that person, what's the most boring part that you don't understand? I don't understand what's going on.
Man, I think you could probably throw out a couple of them. Sometimes if it's like if they get into the boring engagements on the feet where they're just like sort of like slapping each other and they're not really going for takedowns, or if you get guys where they're just on the ground but they're really not engaging with each other from either from the bottom guard or from the top guard pass.
All right, so let's just take those 2 scenarios, because those are pretty much, if you don't know what you're looking at, those are pretty much the only 2 scenarios that there are. All right, they're standing up and it's boring. They're on the ground and it's boring. They're standing up and it's boring. Can I understand it though?
Maybe to a degree, but like, right. So as an example, go ahead.
They're on the ground and it's boring.
Yeah, you have no idea what you're looking at.
I have no idea what's going on, right? And so at least we're going to take that reset position. We're not going to throw them back into the one part of the game that bores you and you don't understand. So we're going to get you again, we're going to move the game closer to offense. rather than starting in the most boring part that nobody understands, that's far away from scoring, we're going to start you in a position that everybody understands. Well, most people understand, especially if they have any kind of experience with wrestling. Most people understand, and it's closer to a submission.
Mhm.
So we're favoring offense. Always the rule is going to favor offense. Like, why did he pick that? Because it was probably going to end the match. We want points on the board.
Yeah. So, Brandon, I want to switch back to CJI real quick, kind of talking the same ideas, the same rule sets and attacking. We were talking about, who's stalling. The Kade Ruotolo and Levi Jones-Leary match. I want to ask you, because there was a little controversy on that. I think the right person won personally. However, how did you score that? And do you think that the correct person won that match?
Well, I think just by nature of the fact that there is so much controversy and that everybody is kind of split 50-50 on it, means that there wasn't a clear winner, right? Like, there obviously was not a clear winner, but somebody had to get it. So, like, I mean, there's a clear winner by the way the scorecards came out, but I mean, like, it was so close. Like, I watched it a couple of times. I was like, oh, feel like Kade won. I watched it a couple of times. It's like, if you spend your time just sitting and admiring Levi's guard work, you feel like Levi won, And so it could have gone either. I could see it being scored either way, man. I mean, that's the nature of the 10-point must system. Is these discussions are always going to happen with a 10-point must system. They happen in MMA. They happen in the UFC. That are going to happen in Jiu-Jitsu if we have a 10-point must system. Like, this is just the first of many.
I feel like from an aggressiveness standpoint, I was just watching because obviously they're both effective in the styles of game that they play. Very effective. I mean, Levi's very dangerous.
They were both pretty aggressive.
I thought that Levi, watching it back, was more aggressive in the first two rounds. And then I thought Kade was more aggressive in the second, the 3 rounds.
Like Levi was less aggressive as the match went on. I felt like he was getting less depth to his entries and his balances.
Yeah.
But I still felt like he was still playing his game. I just don't feel like you could call either guy for stalling. Like,
no, they were both going.
They were both trying to do what they did and impose their will, and their wills canceled one another for the most part. And I thought it was fantastic jiu-jitsu match.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great match. And it's got a lot of controversy around it. Great. Great.
Yeah.
That's just that had the community talking for a week.
That's right. Gives you a reason to run it back again at some point.
Sports, dude.
Yeah.
I love sports. Like, we're getting close. We're getting closer and closer to jiu-jitsu being real sports. So I love it. It's going to have controversy. It's going to have referee mistakes. Like, that's just the way sports work. You go on a Chicago Bulls message board, you're going to see a lot of stuff about how terrible the refs were and how biased they were against the Mavs last night. But if you go on the Mavs board, they're going to be saying the same thing from the other direction. It's the way sports work. We're tribal. We want our guy to win. I love it.
It's a really good example of like kind of stylistically, two guys are very good. I mean, Kade's good everywhere. Like, but Levi, we didn't really know what to expect. He's kind of like a dark horse a little bit. He was primarily a gi guy a few years ago and has done really well there. But like, it's just incredible guard retention. And I do agree, like with the depth of the entries. Like, I would think as the match progressed, I didn't feel like he was getting Kade in as much trouble. Essentially,
round four was a good round for Levi.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it's
awesome.
It's impossible
regardless.
To call. Yeah. But like what Levi brought to the table that I don't think, like, definitely that I didn't realize coming in, is I didn't understand how good he had gotten at the leg game and and most importantly, how well he had integrated it into his open guard bolo game.
Yeah.
Like, it's all one piece now, and that makes him terrifying. And you saw it. I mean, he's just terrifying. How do you pass his guard? How do you get through that safely? I don't know. It's an incredible guard work. I was super inspired. I've been trying to get my old bones creaking around and doing some of that stuff, and it's not as easy.
Creaking around.
Well, right. When you watch, like, again, Kade was in when he was in those guard passing situations. He was, it was hard to commit to anything, and he had to be quick to bail on it because, as soon as he would get a bite on the leg, he had to either bail or, he was going to get caught in something, and it's not what you want as a guard passer, right? So
No. What the thing with the way both him and his brother pass, though, is there always a split second from a game-changing moment. Just the way they pass on the outside, just the nature of their game, their speed, the change in directions, moving around to north-south, coming back the other way, rumble passing underneath. They're just non-stop. And so just allowing him to get in there and move and play like that, pull out, jump in, pull out, jump in. It almost always works out. And just Levi's just he's a master. Levi's a master.
Brandon, you like literally like watching so closely, 9 hours of first day fight. You're really breaking down everything and just looking at positional work and techniques. Like, is there a trend that you saw or maybe a couple ideas that maybe you took away from that weekend as far as like techniques or progression or evolution of jiu-jitsu? Anything specific that you saw?
Well, I think the most significant and visually obvious thing that we saw was how much the pit or the alley style setup can change things.
Yeah.
And I think that what we're going to see is if we're going to, as a sport, if we're going to move down that road, which, hey, let's do it. I'm all for it. I think it's super cool. But if we're going to move down that road, we're going to have to realize that the playing surface for the pros is going to be different than the practice surface for people that want to be pros.
Yeah.
And so that's again, that's fine. But the people who start getting access to a ramp to practice on are going to start to develop new metas.
Yeah.
And you're going to see that start to arise. Because did you guys get to play on the angled wall at all?
No.
It's so much fun. It's so cool. But it's like nothing else feels like it. Like, it doesn't feel like jiu-jitsu in the same way that you're used to, because the gravity, like, you're sliding down the wall, but you're also like leaning on the wall. It's very interesting, and a lot of interesting play is going to come from that, from the guys who keep that wall installed in the gym. So it'd be interesting to see if that like trickles down throughout the I guess the jiu-jitsu professional pipeline, down through the amateur pipeline into the kids classes. Like, because if ultimately we're going to have a sport where you get paid $1 million to sign you get paid $1 million a year. If ultimately we're going to have that, and we all want that, right? That means that pipeline is going to be they need to be practicing on the surface that they're going to be playing on. Like the 10-year-old basketball league, they have 10-foot rims. You know what I mean? They have a regular basketball court. Like, junior varsity is the same as the pros as far as the court goes. Like, you start learning to play on that court early.
Yeah, I think the point you made was actually, I was thinking about techniques, but you're actually talking about the environment. Changing the environment that you grapple in is what made the big adjustment. And that could lead to some different techniques. Obviously, we saw
like a great example of a match.
Tackett brothers, yeah.
Tackett brothers, but even like a match that had happened before that was different was like, with Owen Livesley, right? Like him and Nicky Rod had gone together before on Polaris. Very different match. Because
out of bounds. And
a lot of out of bounds. It's like, but with it not going out of bounds is like that one, it was done. Like, it was a completely different match. And so, it's interesting to watch that again, thinking about every match that you've watched that went out of bounds. Like, what if it didn't? How much would that have changed it? And so I thought that was like a clear example of like, here's what it looks like with an out of bounds on a raised platform. Here's what it looks like when you can't get out of bounds and you have to stay and play the whole time.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was a great addition for the gameplay. And there's it may be that we end up with like two different, like how we have gi and no gi, we're gonna have pit and no pit.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, the one thing that I didn't.
No, dude, I do no pit jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, pit no.
I don't like to get in the pit.
That's right.
I feel like it.
You know,
me up.
I'll tell you, like we've seen rule sets, we've seen cage match, like people grappling in a cage. I think the big thing about an alley or a pit is like when we're talking about presenting a product for viewership, right? It's a lot easier to see. You're not looking through a cage wall. You don't have all these poles and posts in the way. So you can actually get better access to seeing what's going on. Like it gives you a better visual on so much of that. So I think like
you also can't lean on that damn thing.
you can't lean. Yeah.
You can't. You can lean on a big cage wall.
Right.
You can't lean on an angled surface. So that's going to make you fight to stay off that damn thing. Whereas like if you get really good at wall work, like you can let your back be up against the cage wall and you can just basically
sit against
you
it.
can sit against it and you get really good at defending that. Whereas like you can't just sit flat. Well, at least not right now. Maybe they'll figure out a way to do it. You can't press up against the angled wall and let a guy exhaust himself trying to take you down because it's going to put you right on your back.
Yeah.
The MMA, the cage wall prevents takedowns in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm.
But in the angled wall, it encourages takedowns. So like if you get pushed back against it, like they're gonna ankle pick. It's just a simple
slide down.
and you just slide right down. You can't stop it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's gonna enforce a lot. It's gonna make for some exciting jiu-jitsu in the future. I think it's a nice. I think it's a nice play-in surface that works really well for the sport. But I actually want to counter what you said, Eugene. I don't feel like it's the best live viewer experience.
Okay.
I think it's the best TV. It might be one of the best TV product experiences. But if you don't have a large arena, you can't see down inside the bowl.
Right.
Like you need to be pretty high up in an arena to see down into the bowl. Like the people sitting at the edge of the pit, boom, they can see everything. That's incredible. That's an incredible experience. Like I got to watch all of it from right here. That's great. But then even like the 5 or 6.
What about the
VIP
people that were sitting around?
You can't see down in there so well.
I see.
Because I was wondering about
the first layer of the bowl, you still got dead spots.
Yeah.
And then up above, it's great, but you're like we went to Karate Combat, and this has been a couple of months ago, and we had VIP passes, but we ended up sitting in the high nosebleeds so that we could actually watch because the angles are just not right when it's low. So you got to be able to get up above it.
Can you lower it? Maybe like put it down.
The one for CJI is shorter than the Karate Combat.
Logistically, well, I'm just saying like set the alley lower down in the ground somehow and have like, I don't know. So you don't have people
about that logistically, like you would have to.
I know it's crazy.
Dig a pit in the bottom of the Thomas and Mack Center.
Let's go.
You have a subfloor around it.
Yeah,
that'd be too much.
Build up. And dude, think about the logistics of doing something like that for the PGF. Like we're just not in a position to be able to pull that off right now. I'm not throwing 3 million at one event. I'm trying to do 4 next year. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to have a sustainable, repeatable, scalable product, which means that I have to build it in a certain way. So, and I don't want to be CGI Junior either with my branding.
That's right. You know? So what are you excited about coming up with the PGF? Because obviously you guys, you've been building this thing up, since 2020. And then this is, the last season was incredible. And then I'm sure you guys are going to try to outdo it this year coming up this season. So what do you have planned and what are you excited about?
Yeah. So we're in Vegas again, November 3rd through the 8th for the PGF. And I feel like we've got a pretty nasty roster put together. We've been starting to release some of the names. Ryan Aitken, we've talked about. He's the Combat Jiu-Jitsu World Champion. He's the EBI Absolute Reigning Champion.
What's the weight class for this one?
205 pounds.
Okay, that's good because
light heavy, right?
Because he'll drop weight, but he's a big boy.
Yeah, and he is a master weight cutter as well.
Yeah, because I've seen him. But it's like that's probably going to be a much easier weight cut for him. Not having to drop so much.
One of the challenges though is that Ryan he's a guy who he does his best jiu-jitsu by limiting movement, by shutting you down.
Okay.
And we're putting him into a 6-minute format that's sub only. He's a great submission artist, but can he get it done quickly? That's going to be the real question because as you know, in the PGF, the only way to score is by submission. So
Right.
we've had a lot of great guys come through that don't finish matches and don't make the playoff. You know, PJ Barch just finished third at ADCC. He barely squeaked into the playoffs last year or last season. So,
it's wild. Do you think, like, because there's obviously ADCC, most of the athletes, there's a lot of up and comers. There were at least some up and comers. Maybe guys are really good regionally, but not known nationwide. Do you think that kind of plays a role into some of these bigger names, not knowing what to expect from some of these other athletes that aren't as well known?
I think that what I really think happens is that some of the guys they're higher up the traditional jiu-jitsu food chain, like the competitive food chain, they underestimate how hard the PGF is and what it's actually asking of them. Like, I'm asking you to come and put a whole season's worth of jiu-jitsu down into 1 week. And you got to be a little bit crazy to even agree to come and do it. You know, I'm asking you to do 3 competition matches a night. No problem. 4 nights in a row on TV, on Fight Pass.
That's rough.
In a team event. And then the
rough.
top 8 of you get the honor to fight in the playoff the next night 3 more times to try to win the money. So, yeah, it's a crazy ask. So you got to be a little bit nuts just to say yes to it. And I think that some of these high-level guys, when they come in, some of them have done really well. Some of them have struggled to make the playoffs and then just not made the playoffs. So we saw it every year. It doesn't matter what the level is that comes in. You have to have a strategy on how you're gonna win the season. Like, there's a lot more to it than just go out here and do my best jiu-jitsu and see what happens. See if I can get that decision. There is no decision. A draw is 0. You might as well take some risk and try to get some points on the board.
Well, and I think that, a lot of times athletes who come from a traditional, sort of place, they get used to a sort of a normal traditional sort of format, right? So I'm going to score my points, I'm going to get position, I'm going to do these things, and then I'm going to work towards a submission because I can still win the match that way. And they become very well adapted to that. But being in a situation where, like you said, you can't score if you don't get a submission, being able to be super focused on the submission, it's a different mentality. And you have to adapt differently to that. So, I'm sure as the PGF gets bigger, you'll probably start to see more and more of that, where you'll have guys that are better submission fighters and say, hey, I'm going to get my points, I'm going to get my position, and then I'm going to slowly work forward, when it's like, you only got 6 minutes, bro. You got to go. Like, you have to play that kind of style of match very, very differently than, say, like a traditional IBJJF ADCC, match or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I'm not trying to see, the point of the PGF is not to find out who's the best jiu-jitsu player in the world. The point of the PGF is to find out who can take what they know about jiu-jitsu and win this game that we made up. Like, okay, it's not real jiu-jitsu. It's sport. I'm going totally down the sports direction. You're like,
yeah.
Good jiu-jitsu is stalling on TV. Like, defensive jiu-jitsu, if I was doing self-defense and doing like the purest form of jiu-jitsu, I would take my time when you passed my guard. I would make sure that I was covered up and set up so I can't get hit, or I'm tying you up and I'm going to slowly recover my guard. In the PGF, that's stalling. On TV, that's stalling. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to be pushing the action forward, bro. I'm excited about PGF this season.
Are there any ideas that you've brought over to the PGF? And I know there's probably a bunch, but are there any ideas that you brought over to the PGF from other sports, kind of going back to something you talked about earlier, that you think either have made like a good impact or something that you're excited to throw into the mix in the future?
Well, I love the draft idea that we do. To me, the draft is almost like the most fun part of the whole season. So we do an auction draft where the players come up one at a time, and then the coaches. So you got like Hodger. Last season you had Hodger Gracie and Hegan Machado and Dean Lister. Like, they're all fighting for these athletes to come and play on their team for the week. And to me, that's so much fun. The big thing that we're changing this year is we have a standalone fantasy app that we've built, a PGF fantasy app. So rather than just having a fantasy program in place that was good enough, we're going to have a pretty good one this year. So we'll have that launched in the next couple of weeks. We're almost done with it.
So Brandon, a little bit about like the rule sets. We talked about the points, but how does if people don't know, they're not familiar, the team aspect, how's the team aspect work, number one? And then how do you get into the playoffs? Obviously it points, but like who gets in the playoffs, how many people, and then what's the format in the playoffs?
So each athlete, there's 20 athletes on the roster, and they're split into 4 teams, 5 athletes per team. Each team also has 2 alternates that are like, they had 2 bench players basically that are waiting to come in. But there's 20 athletes on the regular roster, 5 athletes, 4 teams. Okay. Every athlete has 12 matches, 3 matches a night for 4 nights. And we call that the regular season. If you win your match, your 6-minute match with a choke, we call that a kill. That puts 6 points towards the playoff. If you win your match with a break, which is a joint lock, we give you 3 points towards the playoff. If you lose or if the match goes to a draw, same result, you get 0 points towards the playoff. And that's a really important part. Same result. So you might as well take risk because a draw and a loss net you the same result. If you win in under a minute, any submission, you get a bonus point. When you score, your team scores. The team at the end of the regular season that has the most points wins $100,000 to split between the 5 guys. The top 8 people, regardless of what team they're on, get bracketed. They get seeded into a bracket playoff for Friday night, and the winner of that gets another $20,000. And everybody gets a flat rate just to show up regardless of how terrible they do. So that's an important part of what we're trying to accomplish. And we're going to pay everybody for being here. Thank you for your time.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think it's single elimination once you get into in the tournament, single elimination bracketing. Yeah. Very cool. Is there any surprises that like maybe from last season? I think Andy Varela won. Is that correct?
Andy Varela won the tournament. Yeah.
Who's a stud and very aggressive guy. You know, like his style is very.
That's a tournament that's like made for a guy like that who's like ready to throw down and doesn't care.
Yeah,
he's always to grind every single day.
What do you think? I mean, we talked about styles or anything like as far as personalities that you look for, or any kind of attributes you look for besides like their jiu-jitsu credentials that like stand out to you that might make somebody really special or do well?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I get to handpick the roster for the most part. You know, it's not totally, I don't totally do it by myself, but I get to like lead the vision for what I want the roster to be and what I'm looking for certain kinds of athletes. Like you need a stopper. Like imagine you're a coach now, Eugene. You're a coach, and Chewy, you're a coach of team number 2. All right. Well, there's ways to get positive results in a match. I get 6 points out of my guy. I can get 3 points out of my guy. I can get 0 points out of my guy. But if I get 0 points out of my guy and the other team got 0 too, that guy's a stopper. Now, what do you got? A guy like AJ Agazarm, he didn't score 1 point last season, but nobody scored. He gave the other teams no points either. So he was a net 0. There were some guys who scored, but they got scored on more than they scored. So that, anyway, there's different guys that I'm looking for. Some guys are going to be a stopper. Some guys are going to be a showstopper, but there's ways to build a roster that are coming together. It's interesting to watch.
Well, that's almost like playing almost like thinking like a basketball team, right? Like, okay, here's the guy that's going to score your points. You know, here's your guy that's going to play defense. It's probably not, thinking about like the Chicago Bulls back in the day, like Dennis Rodman is obviously not putting up 30, 40 points in a game, right? There's other guys that do that, but he'll be all over him so that the other team doesn't score points.
He's going to give you 22 rebounds tonight, though.
That's
and he's going to get 5 deflections, 2 steals. Like he's going to make a difference in the game. That's right.
He's gonna give
So
your
yeah,
other guys a
sports, man.
chance.
All
Yeah.
the stuff that we love about sports, I want that part in jiu-jitsu. The part that makes us addicted to sports and teams and leagues. I want all that sticky stuff stuck on jiu-jitsu. So that, yeah, I'm trying to model all of that.
Well, I think it's kind of an interesting way to approach jiu-jitsu, right? Because like you said, a lot of times, like when we get into jiu-jitsu, right? Like most people want to, like when you think about certain big tournaments, right? The whole thing is let's see who the best is or whatever. And your philosophy is more of like, let's incentivize offense. Let's make this really fun to watch. Obviously, we want to see who the best person is on that day in this style or whatever, but really it's more about the sport entertainment aspect of it. And let's see who can play this game that we created the best, as you said in your own words. So I think that's an interesting philosophy, right? You're like, I'm not trying to be the next ADCC and be the world championships. We're trying to create something that is really fun to watch, addictive to watch, and, creates a different sort of flavor of jiu-jitsu that people might enjoy more.
That's the idea. Yeah. Like let ADCC and IBJJF and whoever else figure out who's the best at jiu-jitsu or at grappling or whatever, using whatever rule set you guys want to determine is the thing that makes somebody the best. Let the Gracies and the self-defense guys, let them do their thing too.
Yeah.
We need that. Like, oh, sport jiu-jitsu is ruining everything. Okay, cool. I need that information too. I care about that information too. You guys go do the research and development on that and bring that back to me. I'll go do the research and development on how do we turn it into a sport. That's the part that interests me the most. I want to have sports in jiu-jitsu, and those things all can exist at the same time, and the whole industry can get healthier because of it.
Yeah, everybody's got different stuff they enjoy. They look at. They maybe want some entertainment. Some people want to see who purely is the best quote unquote jiu-jitsu athlete or jiu-jitsu practitioner. It's like, what are you in there for, right? We all have our own story and our own reason for doing jiu-jitsu or grappling or martial arts, right? And I think different things draw people in. Like if somebody grew up playing, basketball, soccer, things like that, more team sports, they might be more attracted to watching a team aspect of grappling versus something else.
We have to, if we want the sport, if we want the industry to really reward the athletes, we have to give people what they want to see. And like attention is currency. And if I can't get you to sit down and watch this jiu-jitsu match, there's going to be no currency on the other side of that. And nobody's going to get paid in jiu-jitsu. And listen, jiu-jitsu won't be worse for it. Jiu-jitsu is going to be just fine, but the athletes won't be paid.
Right.
And so I want to create a way for these athletes to have actual careers, not just the top guys. Maybe for a while I can't give anybody $1 million a year, but what if I could give 10 guys $20,000 a year? What if I could, and you know what I mean? What if I could give all 20 guys on the roster could make $100,000 a year? You're not going to turn into a billionaire like that unless you do well with your investments, but we could start to change the lives of like 20 people at a time in the sport instead of just like throwing it all at the top guy. So I'm trying to create like an ecosystem and a structure that eventually is going to grow, that everybody's going to be able, not everybody, but like the athletes are going to be able to come in there and try to make a real career out of this without having to open a school and without having to, like, they'll just be a professional athlete. That's the vision, at least.
Well, that's cool. And I think that, again, one of the things for me is like, I'm excited about like your organization in some respects because of the fact that I think, because this thing started off as a grassroots thing with you. And then, it's your baby and you're building it up. And then now it's obviously you've got more options and availability and more financing to make the thing happen. But I think from the standpoint is you're still looking at it from this, like you're trying to build this as a business for the long term that can then grow from there and make it sustainable, which I think is important because, like I've said this before on the podcast, I've seen so many MMA organizations. You've seen a bunch in jiu-jitsu, like, Ben Morris is one that come out guns blazing, like, man, we're going to we're going to just throw money around and whatever. And then they don't think about the actual product that they're delivering more than like, oh, we're just going to get the best people and they're going to roll.
That's not it.
And that's
a
not it.
move.
Exactly. And then what I think what's interesting is like you've been very like thoughtful and had a very clear approach on how to make an actual good jiu-jitsu match. And I think that if you guys listening to this, if you go back and watch like the last season of PGF, it was just super exciting. Almost every match is a banger. Everybody's getting after it. The matches are good, and they're 6 minutes. They're short. So again, and the guys are going to get after because they have that kind of energy. And so I think you have a good product. You have a good actual match format that people can watch. Like even my wife, who is very casual about jiu-jitsu, she says hi, by the way. She says, hey Brandon.
Hey,
But she's like, even as a casual person, like we're downstairs and had it on the TV and I'm watching the matches and she's watching them and she's interested in them. Opposed to where like sometimes if I'm watching like other matches from other organizations that are a little bit longer, a little bit more slower paced, she's kind of like maybe looking and then she like screwing around on her phone. You know what I mean? And so like a lot of times that's like my litmus test for attention is like if Jess is sitting there and she doesn't really have a dog in the fight and she's interested, it's like that's going to be your casual person watching. She's like, oh, I'm interested in this one versus I'm not interested in this one. And so I think you developed a good product. And so that way I think then you can get into the marketing, the money and everything else. You can say, let's start building this thing up because the deliverable that we're giving people is worthy of their time and attention.
Well, that's the idea. Like, because we started it out so small, I feel like we could work out a lot of the kinks while nobody was looking. Well, it didn't matter. While it was just an idea that Brandon's crazy, let's try to do this. But I believed in it, like as something. I felt like there was something that we could really do with it, and so I just kept refining it and trying to chisel away at it. And Keelan, obviously, the behind the scenes guys don't always get the love, but Keelan really needs a lot of the credit for what the PGF is and what it's become. Just like Seth with CJI,
Sure.
he needs a lot of the credit for the way that went down. Craig was the mouthpiece, but Seth is the man. He did a really, really good job. And it seems like he's coming from a good spot too, which I really like.
With Keelan, so for you guys that don't know, like Keelan, for when you went and made this change to, becoming more media focused and branding and everything else and during 2020, because the gym stuff was kind of like, up in the air, Keelan was your guy who started helping you make videos and stuff like that. And, make the content, put on the PGF event. And I remember the very first year when you're going through your 13 weeks, even for just like a sort of a brand new sort of small homegrown kind of thing. I remember you guys always had a pretty good stream going. It wasn't like I've seen other streams for smaller like little events and they sometimes aren't so good. The streams were good to watch.
Right.
Yeah, but curious about that with Keelan. Was Keelan like a videographer or anything before, or was it just like a dude who wanted to help?
No, Keelan had no experience when he started. He was a blue belt and he got his ACL torn. Old Micah Miller, Cole Miller, Micah Miller, those boys.
I know of them. Yeah,
MMA fighter. Cole Miller was an MMA fighter.
Yeah,
right?
Cole. Yeah. Those are my boys. I love those guys. We were down there and training at Cole's. We just took a trip down. Me and Cole were making some content together, and Keelan rode down with me. And old Micah and Keelan were tied up in the legs, and Keelan ends up getting his ACL popped. Oh, blows his ACL out. He's like, oh no, I'm a waiter. What am I going to do? You know what I mean? And so I was like, man, tell you what, I need some help, like just filming my classes. I'll give you a couple $100 a month till you get back on your feet. And that's where it started. He had no experience before that. And then now he's the lead videographer for Five Finger Death Punch. He's on tour with an international rock band right now. He just spent 2 months in Europe on tour with Five Finger Death Punch and Metallica.
It's incredible.
And now he's out on the U.S. tour.
That's
It's crazy
cool,
what he grew into. Like my big philosophy, just, I know this is kind of off topic, but like business wise, is I only hire samurai. Like I'm only going to hire you if I know that whatever I ask you to do, you'll try to draw a perfect circle every day for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like if your job is to wake up and draw a circle every day, you're going to spend all day trying to get that thing correct and knowing that you'll never catch it. Like, and Keelan's that kind of dude. If I asked him to take the trash out, he would become a master trash bag specialist, you know?
Yeah.
So I try to grab people like that, and then I try to let them go in whatever direction they are passionate about, because then they're going to outwork everybody. So somebody that loves to work, and then you give them something that they love to work on, and they'll just crush it out of the park. And so that's what we did with Keelan.
Nice.
What about you, Brandon? What about like your commentary, like doing a lot more commentary? Have you perfected that craft, or not improved it, I guess? I don't want to say, we talk about perfection is probably not a real thing. Obviously, you can't ever get perfect, but how have you like gotten better? You know, like think about you getting better at jiu-jitsu. How have you gotten better at this thing that's a subset of jiu-jitsu, this commentary and understanding what's going on and just being at the helm and like really being able to break things down for people and understand what's going on and share that through commentary?
Man, it's funny you say that, because to me, I sort of just feel like I'm just talking about jiu-jitsu. I'm just kind of being natural.
Yeah.
I feel like my job's super easy. It's the guy sitting beside me is always the guy that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't do his job. Like TJ, oh my gosh, he's got the producer in his ear, and he's got to hit the read at the certain point, and he's got to get out of the way when something cool happens, and then he's got to jump back in right at the right spot. Like, he's guiding the whole broadcast, you know. Like, TJ's job is hard. I feel like I just start talking about jiu-jitsu when he stops. He'll, he starts talking and saying something, and then I go, and then he stops, and I go, yeah, and now this is the leg drag position, and I sound like a redneck, and I'm just gonna say something, like,
Yeah.
I feel like my job's pretty easy, but the hardest part, I guess, is just making sure you stay out of each other's way. But me and TJ have been working together so long, I feel like we got our stuff down. But it is always interesting when you get thrown into another situation, like, oh, maybe I need to get some more like actual skill set and craft to this thing. And so I've tried to do that when I've had opportunity over the years. TJ's been a good mentor for me, working with Victor Davila, he does all the Spanish broadcasts for the UFC. He does my gig for the UFC, and I learned a lot from him. Jorge, all those guys, Jorge Elias, all those guys with that combat jiu-jitsu EBI setup. They're awesome. They've been super patient with me as I've tried to develop and hone that into an actual skill set and craft, rather than just being a redneck on a microphone that dorks out about jiu-jitsu. So I've learned a lot from those guys. Mostly it's just about how to just be more professional and not sound like such a redneck.
Well, I think you probably had a decent base to work with, because I know that years ago we talked about it, and I don't know how much you kept it up, but you would just talk about just watching tape, watching matches.
Yeah.
And so obviously if you're sitting around watching matches and you have an interest in actually watching matches when nothing's going on, then obviously when you actually get to watch the matches and then you just had your thoughts about it, probably was a little bit easier. You just had to polish up the speaking a little bit then.
Yeah, and I try to avoid things like, these are the main things, really. Eddie told me when I first started working for him, just say what you see.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, don't worry about, oh, in this situation, I like to do this. Like, I don't want to hear my commentators talking about what they would do and how cool they are. And in this situation, I would do this. Oh, what he needs to do right here. Don't tell him what he needs to do. Say what you see. Here's what's happening. Explain it to the viewer. It's not a chance for you to tell everybody how awesome you are at jiu-jitsu.
Right. So you're not trying to flex on them.
It's a chance for you to explain to the viewer, which means sometimes you got to put it down there where the chickens can get after it. You know what I mean? Like, you got to make it simple for the people who aren't as studied as you are. How do I convey this information to them? And how do I do it really quickly in real time? This complex thing that I know they don't understand. All right, he's in the leg drag position, or all right, he's on top here. He's looking to get around towards the back. Like, I can call that a leg drag, but I gotta give you the quickest, dirtiest definition right now before he moves on to the next thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, that, which to me, in a lot of cases, demonstrates a level of knowledge and expertise above the on a higher level. Because again, if you can take some of this complex stuff, and then you can break it down into the very simplistic stuff, I think that's really useful. Because from a coaching standpoint, if you got a new student, I mean, what's going to be more useful to the student learning this idea for the first time? Well, like, oh, this is this leg drag position, or like you said, this is used to do this. Like, so we have an understanding of simply as to why we're doing it. Yes, you know the name, but now you understand the simplistic version of like, why are we here? What is this thing used for? And so being able to explain those ideas also, I think, demonstrates a level of knowledge that's, because a lot of times if to explain something really simple, you have to know it very well.
Yeah, Lonnie Jones, one of my mentors, Lonnie Jones, told me that. He's like, if you can't make a simple analogy, you don't really understand it.
That's a great point. Brandon, as far as like all the traveling and stuff and keeping up with your own training, have you been able to kind of balance keeping your body together, training and doing all the traveling, all that stuff, and still kind of improving your game and being one of the older guys on the mat, probably still being very effective and having a good game, solid game that, you enjoy still playing and keeping your body on the mats?
Well, I still get to train like 4 days a week, I would say, because I just train when I'm on the road. When I pretty much everywhere I go is jiu-jitsu stuff, so there's always somewhere and somebody to train with, even if I can just get a small like private session with a couple of guys, like where we get out there and just roll. But I don't spend a lot of time drilling. I spend a lot of time rolling. Most of my training is just me getting out there, getting exercise in, not like spending some time relieving my mind, making sure I don't get hurt, having fun with my friends. That's what jiu-jitsu is for me at this point. To me, I'm treating it about as serious as I would treat a pickup basketball game. I'm not out there trying to prove to Chewy, oh, I'm the man still, Chewy. No, dude, I'm 44 years old and I'm trying to make sure this big bearded animal doesn't hurt me because I'm so frail and dying. So let me make sure that I treat this guy with respect when I come to him. And so mostly I feel like I can set the tone when you come at me. But when you grip me, I can grip you back in a way that says, yo, I'm here to figure it out. Or I can grip you back in a way that says, I'm here to get some exercise and have a good time. And I feel like a smile and a how I grip the guy goes a long way to make sure that I can keep myself on the mats. So that's what I'm trying to do. I don't really care if Chewy's impressed by how good I am anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just here to train because I love jiu-jitsu and that's what I want to do every day. So that's kind of my main focus. That's how I stay on the mat.
When did that change for you, do you think? When did that perspective kind of shift as like, I'm just here to have fun and enjoy myself and be with my buddies, and as opposed to like, I'm trying to be the best guy on the mat? Not that you're not trying to win and be effective, but like,
no, I'm definitely not out to be the best guy on the mat. You're right. I'm just out. Dude, it's like I'm playing guitar. I want to spend time with my guitar. I want to play guitar because I like playing guitar, not because I got an album that I'm writing. You know what I'm saying? And nothing wrong with writing an album. I'm just not writing an album. There's nothing wrong with not writing an album either. There's nothing wrong with just sitting down and enjoying spending time with your guitar and playing music. That's how I sort of treat my jiu-jitsu. I'm just spending time with it because I enjoy it now. And if I can, like, being able to let go of the need to impress Chewy with how good my jiu-jitsu is, it's probably the best thing that ever happened to my jiu-jitsu.
I'll tell you, being around you and when you've come to the gym a couple times and you've run some seminars, your teaching style is really, really enjoyable. You explain things a certain way that I think I think that goes to show your commentary as well, right? It's a way that everybody can understand. You break things down a certain way. So, and I think it's just so when you've been around, we've rolled together before, and you try to punch choke me, I'll never forget you for doing that. Like I remember you tried. Nope, you didn't get me.
It's fake.
Yep,
Move.
You got me once.
I knew you were going for it.
Say
I
what?
knew it.
So you got me one.
With a punch choke?
Oh yeah.
Ooh,
I remember you were showing it. You were showing it, and like it's like you popped it in, And like, I think you did it so damn quick. And then afterwards, I was like, I think like you like popped it in, got it, but then you kind of let go. I was like, you son of a bitch. Like, you got me, you know,
I knew you were,
it's good.
It's sneaky, dude.
the thing is, I knew you were going for it. And I was like, that's the only thing I was paying attention to. But to get into that position, you have to get into probably mount. And that's where you were at mount. So I'll give you that. You mounted me, but you didn't punch choke me. But man, I will tell you, man, it's always a pleasure to speak to you and have you out to the gym. And if you're ever coming through, please stop in and punch choke some of us.
Well, I'll try. I don't think you already shut me down once. I'm getting worse as I get older. So,
dude, we're all getting older, man. We're all in our.
Look, I gotta do my stretches like a PE coach these days. You know what I mean? Like, you got to warm up the old torso.
Hey, if you come in, I've had Chewy doing some mobility work that he likes doing, so I'll show you some of that stuff, some joint training stuff. I think helps out.
It's been good stuff for old people wanting to roll.
Keeps your old bones kind of moving a little bit. So
listen, don't get it twisted. I was downplaying myself a little bit. I can still move out there, Eugene.
Don't
get it twisted up. Don't get it twisted, Eugene.
I won't, man. I respect you. I respect the game. What you got? So Brandon, what do you got going on in the future? What's you got PGF coming up? Anything else on the horizon that you're kind of looking forward to?
Well, first off, real quick, before you do, tell us what's going on, but let us know, like, for people that are listening, tell us about like when the PGF's coming up and where they can find it, and then you can tell us about all the other stuff you got going on.
The PGF season 7 starts November 3rd. Goes through November 8th. It's going to be live and free on YouTube all regular season. The draft, the regular season, totally free to watch on YouTube as it's always been. And then the finale will be exclusively on UFC Fight Pass, the PGF playoff finale. UFC Fight Pass, November the 8th. November the 3rd is the draft. We're going all week long for free on YouTube. And then over to UFC Fight Pass. Las Vegas, it's invitation only also. So there are no tickets. Don't hit me up about tickets. There are no tickets. We got a couple of VIP passes. The info on that's in the PGF World Instagram bio, but we're not selling tickets. It's just invitation only to attend.
Very cool. And then what you got going on?
I gotta go. I'm gonna be in like 5 different cities in the next. Oh no, more than that. We got the PGF qualifier on the 14th. Before that, like tomorrow, I have to leave for Dallas. I have to fly from Dallas to Nashville, PGF qualifier. Then I fly to Atlanta to join the band for a week. So we'll be in Atlanta, Biloxi, Austin. Then I got a meeting in Austin, and then we'd go to Houston. I got a meeting with Carlos Machado there. We go back to Carlos's gym. Me and Carlos Machado are working on a super exciting new project. I can't talk about it yet, but it's going to be insane. And then I fly home on the 21st. All that between now and September 21st. But Jiu-Jitsu Overdose coming up in December with Eddie and Vic and all those guys. They're doing a pretty crazy event. They're doing a week long of Jiu-Jitsu too, but they got a different event, like different promotion every night. So like CJJ Worlds, EBI, Medusa, cool. Combat Jiu-Jitsu Mexico. I think it's like MMA Mexico. I think it's actually MMA fights on one of the nights.
Very cool.
But it's all happening at Planet Hollywood, like in a resort. So it's all inclusive. Everything's included. It's a pretty cool idea. That's Jiu-Jitsu Overdose. I think that's December 11 through 16. UFC Fight Pass Invitational. Oh, I don't know if I'm allowed to tell y'all the date.
Okay. Well, don't have to tell us the date, but it'll be coming up soon. So we'll just know you're there.
October 10th.
Okay.
It's October 10th. I don't know
all right. October 10th.
Not, but it's October 10th.
All good.
And the card's looking sharp.
Awesome.
Looking really good.
Very cool. Brandon, man, thank you so much for your time, brother. It's always a pleasure having you on.
I love you guys a lot. And let me take a moment to praise both of you guys. I love what y'all do, and I really respect and appreciate the space that y'all occupy in the community. Like Chewy as a mentor, Eugene is trying to do things to help people get their bodies healthier and stay on the mat longer. I really respect and love both of you guys a lot, and I always appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
I appreciate you, bro.
Love you too, brother. Appreciate your time, man.
All right, guys. So hopefully you enjoyed the podcast with Brandon. Hopefully you got a couple ideas to chew on. Something interesting. Again, I really thought the thoughtfulness that went into making the matches more offensive and more exciting was really interesting. thinking about it like from a standpoint of, does this move us closer to the submission? I thought that was a really interesting take. A lot of times it's not what we're thinking about with jiu-jitsu. You know, we're thinking about the skill and the different stuff, but thinking about it from a standpoint of what's going to move us closer to the submission. I think it's a interesting idea and probably a useful philosophy if you're trying to make this thing more palatable to the casual person. But again, check out PGF coming up. It's a fun organization, fun matches. And again, thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charlotte's Web CBD, you guys can check them out. If you guys want to see whatever products they have, go to charlottesweb.com. The promo code for the order, if you want to save 30%, is Chewjitsu30, CHEWJITSU30. And then when you get that, you get whatever products or whatever you order, and you order them, send us a receipt either to our Jiu-Jitsu podcast Instagram or to the Jiu-Jitsu podcast at gmail.com, and we'll send you a free bonus as a gift. Just a special thank you for supporting the podcast. And again, you can check out some of their products for a number of different reasons. If you've ever been interested in CBD, my encouragement is try it out for a month, see what kind of effects it has on you, and then go from there. Also, thanks to our sponsor, epicrollbjj.com. If you're looking to get some new jiu-jitsu gear, or you just want a new gi, rash guards, whatever it is, t-shirts, check it out at epicrollbjj.com. Browse through the online store that he has, see if there's anything that catches your eye. He's got a lot of cool designs. The stuff that he sells is good quality, and he has great customer service. And again, you can get 20% off the order there by using the promo code Chewjitsu20, CHEWJITSU20. And again, just as a sort of a side note, this is who I get to make my no-gi gear. So in the near future, I'm going to be doing a new launch of rash guards and shorts, and these will be made by Epic Roll. Also, guys, if you want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by going to our Patreon, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join up, you get a free bundle of bonuses from videos that have to do with all the different guests we've had, back-end stuff that we don't share anywhere else, full recordings of seminars, warm-up routines for jiu-jitsu practitioners specifically, and a whole lot more. If you guys want to get more information, it all comes at a very inexpensive price, and it's available to you at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And again, we put it out there for you. So if you want to support the podcast that you listen to every week, you can do so by going there and checking it out. And guys, if you want to get my daily Chew Crew email letter, you can do so by going to my website at chewjitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join up to the website, you'll get a couple free ebooks that go into game planning for jiu-jitsu and also on ideas on drilling. And then from there, I'll send you my daily email, which can go into everything from diet, lifting, books I'm reading, just anything and everything that I think might be resourceful to you. I put it into the daily letter. The letters are very short. They'll take you probably maybe 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes to read, and then you can be on your way. But it'll definitely give you an idea to consider for the day, to maybe help you with your training or a number of different things. So if you want to check it out, chewjitsu.net/join. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed the podcast. As always, we appreciate you for being here, and we'll talk to you next week.